on Kootenay Morning on Kootenay Co-op Radio. You are listening on Wednesday, January 13th. And we have on the line with us from Caslow, Terry Halleran. Terry, how are you this morning?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. We are talking with you today because it is the second year of a project that is very close to your heart and actually right on your property.
That's true.
And you, do you want to tell us a little bit about what that project is and why you started it?
Okay, sure. Well, we've been in the valley in Meadow Creek for quite some time, and we have a bit of a background, both my wife and I, with sort of fish and wildlife, sort of lifestyle, I suppose. And the property we had here, some of it was, even when my grandfather had it, it was too wet for some agricultural purposes. Mm-hmm. And we have an awful lot of, we have grizzly bears here for one thing, and the grizzly bears are being harassed from the road, and we couldn't create cover for the bears because the ground was too wet to grow trees. So we also had a lot of mortality from amphibians because the land went too dry for, tadpoles and salamanders like that in the late spring. So the idea was to dig some wetlands and improve habitat for amphibians and birds, and also create some cover for the bears from the highway. So that's how it started.
And so what does it become? It's now the largest wetland project in Canada on private land. Is that correct?
On private land, it is. Yes, that's true.
And so what is entailed? How does this happen?
Well, it's I tried to get this going for quite a few years, but it was a partnership between a whole variety of groups. And one of the things that helped was that our property was bordering land owned by Nature Trust. Mm-hmm. And so we already had some ability there to try and create a bigger habitat and a wildlife corridor, I guess.
And so what sort of process did you have to go through? Like this is actually something that the province encourages, correct? Under the Wetlands Action Plan. So if someone has the ability to help restore their land to in this case a wetland type area, there are avenues that they can go through in order to be able to do this, correct?
That's exactly right. Neil Fletcher, through the BC Wildlife Federation Wetlands Program, is very well versed at how that process goes. Mm-hmm. I guess the thing that is really important from at least my point of view is that no one owns land. I mean, it's a bit of a ego statement to say you own land. Mm-hmm. You have title to a piece of property that allows you access there for a certain amount of time. How we take care of the land is how we're going to end up as human beings in the long run. Mm-hmm. And so we just look at it like we're land stewards of this property, and it's part of our responsibility to make sure that the biodiversity and the wildlife and plant species that are here are maintained, and if possible even enhance that, at least in our duration, and hopefully pass that on to future generations. That's the idea here.
Because most people, if they see water on their property, they're going to see that as a problem. They're going to want to drain it because they're going to want to have that kind of land that they could plant something or do that, right?
Well, the history of human beings, I suppose, is paving parking lots or whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's one of the things that's unusual. But here we are we're about 10 hectares at this point, from what I understand this morning. And we have created a whole bunch of drier land because in the process of digging some of these ponds to make them permanently wet, we have 1.5 feet of nice high dirt spread over land that we normally couldn't farm or have agriculture on. So here we have the best of both worlds. We're maximizing both things on one piece of property.
So how many beavers did you have to employ in order to create the wetland?
Well, the funny part is that we don't have any beavers here at all.
I know, yeah.
But we probably will, come to think of it. We already have species coming in here that we haven't had before.
Oh, that's awesome.
And what have been some of the cool things you've looked out your window to see?
Well, believe it or not, it didn't take very long. As soon as we did the first dig last January, and then we planted everything in March. I mean, we planted close to I think, probably close to 1,000 one-gallon pots out there regarding wild roses and Saskatoons and elderberries. And a lot of those plants are now 7, 8 feet tall.
Oh.
So we've created this absolute oasis, and so you end up with dragonflies and bug species and a whole bunch of things that were never there before that are now found a home to live in, so to speak, right?
Do you get a bunch of blueberry pickers in there?
We have not had, we have grizzly bears in there eating the Saskatoons, actually. So that the one thing that, I mean, it's funny how you rate your success, but my wife and I walked through one of the wetlands this past spring, and there was a large grizzly bear track there that had water in the pads of the track that were full of juvenile salamanders and tadpoles. Mm-hmm. That's how you
What a cool
success,
sight, yeah.
You know.
So I imagine it's been a bit of a process.
Oh, yes.
Like in terms of funding and whatnot, how did it come to be?
Well, fortunately, there's never been a home for wetlands. I mean, there's lots of projects going on with fairly decent funding sources for things like grizzly bears and elk and, of course, caribou and wolves and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But wetlands has always been the sort of almost like the orphan child, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But a couple of years ago, they had a wetlands initiative start up where they put $50 million in federally. And so people are finding matched funds with different groups and organizations, mm-hmm. and try and get as many wetlands constructed as they possibly can.
And so on the like, are you a farmer?
I'm not. No, we have our hobby sort of mm-hmm. things with chickens and ducks, but that's about as far as we go.
So have there been any changes to your environment that you hadn't expected? I guess that's what are some of the outcomes that 2 years later, looking back at what you guys have gone through to do this, what would you say have been some of the highlights for you?
The highlights, I suppose, is just walking outside and hearing the amount of yellow-headed blackbirds and red-winged blackbirds and geese landing and eagles, and that's been the highlight, is just seeing that instantly, within a matter of weeks, every time we do something here, we get a response.
Word goes quickly through the wildlife.
It seems to. It seems to.
They're like, hey, there's a new log over there.
You should go check this place out. It's pretty cool.
Exactly. Yeah. I suppose that the unexpected detraction to this was public opposition.
Right.
I didn't really see that coming, but it...
What kind of opposition has there been?
Well, there's some people when we first started doing the project who just saw it as if it was a slap to the agricultural community. Uh-huh. And the truth of the matter is we now have, many hectares of land that will be more productive than when my grandfather had it, for a whole variety of agricultural purposes, right?
Right.
But, I mean, there's been a certain amount of ridicule in the valley regarding what we're doing, but I think some of that just has to do with no one likes change.
I was going to say, is it because people just don't like change, or they're not used to that kind of mentality to put in wetlands? Because, like I said before, it's usually taking them out, right?
Yes, and I think it's a very good point. And I think one of the things that really needs to be nailed home here is that, and I keep saying to people that, they say there's an awful lot of wet ground everywhere. Why do you want to create more? Well, wet land does not a wetland make, so to speak. And it's just because you have spongy ground. When you dig a hole in it and plant the things that normally might have been there before we created dams and highways and all those things, it becomes way more productive. And we don't have hardly any of those wetlands left in British Columbia. Mm-hmm. We only have 3% or 4% valley bottoms, and most of that is under subdivisions or power dams.
Yep.
So when you create a wetland, and when you create a place for that water to actually go and to sit, it does draw it away from other areas, correct?
That's right, and also because you are creating. I'm staying here looking over the back porch right now, and I'm looking at 4 wetlands that are not very large, maybe 50 feet by 200 feet, but because they're 1.5 meters deep, deeper than natural ground level, everything for 450 yards is now 1.5 foot higher dirt. Mm-hmm. So we have this we're going to be able to change, grass plant communities and grow things for a variety of reasons that we never could have done before. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the private land stewardship thing, I would like to make this point as best as I could, which is probably not good enough, in that people hear about, bad news stories and, this problem in one part of the world, whatever it is. But, creating wildlife habitats is open to anybody, even if you have just a normal backyard. If you put in a pond that's 5 feet by 10 feet and 1.5 feet deep, and a few plants around it that are natural plants, you're going to bring in butterflies and a whole bunch of other things. Mm-hmm. And the history that we have as human beings is, destroying an awful lot of those low-end things before you even had a chance to study them or knew they were there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, of all the things we found in that wetland, we found a bug last year that this summer that, is most rarest bug in BC. Never been seen before at UBC. Mm-hmm. And, that doesn't sound like much, but, we shouldn't think we're too far above all that biodiversity because we are part of that system, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. And it's better to be part of that system than trying to destroy it, right?
I think so, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I would just put a suggestion out there to anyone who has, an acre or, even just a lot. You can plant things and do things yourself that will make a difference. Mm-hmm. You don't have to wait necessarily for government to help you or for some society to do it. I mean, it's open to anybody. That's for sure.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Now, Terry,
thank you so much.
You're having an open house, though, aren't you?
Oh, wait. Yeah.
Yes, we're having an open house on the 24th of January. It's going to be at the Lardo Valley Meadow Creek Hall in Meadow Creek, and it starts at 1 o'clock, and there'll be a talk there from a local wetland specialist up here from Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And Nature Trust will be there, and a few other folks. And then we're going to do a hour and a half, 2-hour tour of some of the wetland projects here, and everyone is welcome.
Excellent. So that's January 24th at Lardo Hall?
That's right.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Terry.
Thank you so much, too.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.